Hi everyone, this is Sharice and welcome back to another episode of Code with Sharice. In this tutorial, we're going to be going over how to use Docker to both locally test and deploy Lambda functions. In this tutorial, we'll be mostly using the AWS CLI to accomplish this task. And in the end, we'll go over our results in the AWS console. So the first step is to, of course, create our Lambda function file. Next, we'll add the code for our Lambda function to this file. Today we're keeping things simple because our focus of this tutorial is to go over how to use Python with Docker. Next would be to create a requirements.txt file. So in my case, I'm creating a very simple function here that doesn't have any imports, but if you did have one, like Boto3, for example, then you would need to create a requirements.txt file, which is how Python downloads a list of packages for a function. Okay, so I'll open this up and we'll just type Boto3 here. So this will default to downloading the latest version of Boto3, but if you need a specific version, then you can use the == and then the version number to select that version. So this is all that's needed to now start creating our Dockerfile. So our Dockerfile defines the Docker image that we'll be creating that will be used for the function. So because Python has a standard Lambda runtime, we can just use the ECR image for that runtime as the base image. Currently, the latest version of Python available as a runtime is 3.12. So that's what I've used here, but you can change the version as needed. Next, we're going to copy that requirements.txt file. So because our base image is a standard AWS base image, we'll have access to a variety of environment variables like this Lambda task root, which is basically where the code for your Lambda will be stored. So we're just copying the local version of requirements.txt into the Docker image that we're creating by running this command. Next, we will install whatever is listed in that requirements.txt. So for this, we're just using the standard pip install command, and we're using the run command here as well to tell Docker to run it as a regular command. Next, we'll copy over the Lambda code. And lastly, we will tell Docker what command we'll be running to start the Lambda. So this is just the name of the file, Lambda function, and then the name of the handler. All right, so now that our Docker file is complete, we can use this Docker file to create a Docker image. And we'll do that using the docker build command. So I'll do the following. Okay, so what we're doing here is we are of course building the image from this Docker file. So we have docker build, and then after that we need to actually specify the platform that we're going to be building it for. So when you create a regular Lambda function in the console, you're always asked what architecture your Lambda will be running on. So for Lambda, there's two types. There's the x86-64 architecture, and then there's the ARM architecture. So in this case, we're using the x86-64, and for that we'll be using Linux/AMD 64. Next, we just give our Docker image a name. So we'll just do Docker Python Lambda image, and we'll give the latest tag, which is pretty standard, and then we'll tell it where it needs to find the Docker file, which is in the current directory. So we have a dot here. Press enter. And very quickly, our image was built. So now that our image is built, we can actually start running the Lambda function using the docker run command. First, I'll clear. Okay, so what's going on in this command is the following. So of course we're running a container, so we'll use docker run. And I just added this remove flag, RM flag, which allows us to easily deal with the cleanup of the container once we stop. And next we need to once again specify the platform that we're running on. And next we have a very important part here. So basically on the inside of the container, the Lambda function will always be running on port 8080. But then how we differentiate different Lambdas is we assign a unique port on the outside. So in this case, we're doing 9000. And lastly, we're just giving the name of the image that we are going to be running a container from. Next, we'll press enter to run. And immediately we are given some logs here. And as we call the function next, we will see even more. So I'll just open a new terminal here. And we're just going to use a curl command to call the function that's running from a Docker container. So when you're running Lambda functions locally from a Docker container, the ending part of the URL will always be the same, which is this 2015, 331, so on, functions, function, invocations. And the beginning will always be the same too, so it's going to be HTTP, localhost. But what's unique for each function is this port. So before we assign the port of 9000, so we'll be using that same port again here. And next we use the data flag to define our Lambda payload that's going to be used in the function. So in our case, our function doesn't do anything with the payload, so we're just giving it an empty payload. And if I press enter, we'll now see the output of the function as if it was called within AWS. All right, so it gave us the correct output, which is hello from my Python Lambda. Great. So once you're satisfied with the results of your Docker image, we can now upload this Docker image to AWS by using AWS ECR. So first I'll just stop that Docker container that we ran before. I'll do Docker PS. And we'll see that we have one container here and it's given a container ID, which is the following. So we'll copy this. Docker stop this container. Okay, and it stopped. Next, we'll connect Docker to Amazon ECR using the following command. So you get your login info from this command, and you can specify the region to make sure that you're logging into the correct region that you want to upload your images to. And next we do Docker login username is going to be AWS, and then the password is going to be whatever we got from this input here. And lastly, we have this ECR URI, which is pretty much going to be the same for this, but the only difference is you would use your own AWS account ID here. So now that it is connected, let's create our new repository. And very important here, it's giving us a repository URI. We're just going to copy that here. And I'll just create a new file to hold on to that information. And paste it here. And once we're done copying that, we can press Q to exit this dialog. And what we did is we just used the ECR CLI to create a new repository, gave that repository a name, and made sure to specify the region, so we're creating and uploading everything to the correct region. So now that we have created this new repository, we can now start the process of uploading our local Docker image to that repository. First step is to tag the image with the repository's URI. So our image is created locally with the name Python Lambda image, and we're using the latest tag. And the remote repository name is going to be this, the URI that we got before, and then we're also going to use the tag latest here as well. So this time we make sure to specify which one we use, which is Docker. Okay, great. And now that the image has been re-tagged, we can now upload that image to ECR. Okay, so what we did is we basically used the Docker push command, which is what we use to push our local images to a remote repository. And we use the image tag that we used in the last step to identify the image we want to push to ECR. Okay, and everything was done successfully. So now what we can do is we can go straight to creating our Lambda function. And at this point, we're just going to take this URI that we got before again, and make sure to also specify the tag. And we'll also give it a role. Okay, and our function was successfully created. And you'll see the command that we used here is a bit different than what you typically use when you're creating a function. So first we need to specify the package type. This is because the create function command defaults to assuming that you're using a zip deployment package. But in our case, we're using an ECR image, so we need to specify that it's an image type. And then we need to specify the image URI that it's going to pull the image from. So this is just going to be the repository URI and then the tag for the image that we want to use. And as usual, we have the role name that is going to be used for the function, and just to be specific, we also use the region as well. Okay, so now let's go into the AWS console and see the results of these commands. Okay, so first we can see our ECR repository here. So this is the name of the repository we gave it. We gave it the name ECR Python Lambda image, and we have the URI to copy from here as well. And if you click on this, we'll see all the different versions of the image. Currently, we've only uploaded one version, so you can just see one image here. And it's been giving the image tag latest, which is pretty standard. And the other resource that we created, of course, was the Lambda function, which is listed here. We'll click on it. And next we will just test it out. So we'll just do test. And so it doesn't really matter what we are giving this function because it doesn't use the event, but we'll just, but it is required. So we'll just give it random and we'll press save and we'll press test. And you'll see we get the same output that we got when we were testing in Docker, we get it here as well. So it says, hello from my Python Lambda. And that's all there is to it. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a lot. If you have any specific topics that you'd want me to cover in the future or have any questions about the content of this video, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for watching.